How do I describe my G-Man, my Gannon? Gannon's my hero. I love him so much. He's not only my hero, he has multiple people that call him his hero as well. He has so many family members that just look up to him at such a small age. He's full of life. He's happy. He's energetic. He loves sports. He loves Sonic. He loves going outside, playing with his friends, his sister, his neighbor, especially Braden. This neighborhood basically gives you a true example of who my son is. Everybody coming together, all the smiles that people have. This is why I have hope, because I feel it. This is Gannon truly speaking to our community. Gannon he loves blue, he loves Sonic, he's into coding, he loves riding his bicycle with his sister, and I know that he's missing that right now. He holds his job as being Big Bubba very important, and for him not to be able to talk to his sisters has to be hurting him. This week has been awful. It's been more than a roller coaster ride. It's been more than emotional mess. I don't even have answers for my feelings other than I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I will never hear his voice, that I'll never hear him run and say, "Mommy," that I'll never hear those corny jokes that he always tells every single day. He has to tell me a joke. He looks forward to telling me something silly. And I'm afraid that I may never see that again or hear it. I don't want to believe that, because that means that I'm giving up hope, and I'm not giving up hope because my son is full of hope. So I'm urging anyone that has any leads, credible leads, if you're too afraid because you know something, a kid just doesn't disappear and no one sees him. It's not how this works. So if you have anything that's credible, if you're afraid, don't worry about it. Imagine my son, how afraid he is. Imagine how afraid Gannon is. So please call, please write. If you need to have someone else to do it for you, please do. Because my son deserves to be here. He deserves to be here. Please call El Paso Sheriff's County.
What's up, guys? It's your girl Ginger, the true crime queen. I'm reminding you now that listener discretion is advised. The dark nature of this show is not suitable for young ears or those that are sensitive to graphic material. But without further ado, let's get it. Thanks for tuning back in this week. Honestly, there is a lot of information I want to cover, and I don't want to leave you guys on here for like a ridiculous amount of time. So I'm gonna hop right on into it. Recapping on last week, we got familiarized with the case of Gannon Stauch from the media's perspective, and today we're going to find out a lot more about the person who was arrested for what we now have learned was not just a disappearance, but a homicide. What you just heard was Gannon's biological mother saying her piece on Gannon just days into the search. She's actually on camera with Gannon's father, Albert, and his little sister, Lena, too. If you didn't happen to catch it on YouTube, I, of course, have it linked and in a playlist on my YouTube page where you can find extra content that I have created to support some of the visuals in this investigation. I'm going to start back off, going a little farther back into Albert and Letecia's actual history together, to help with the context of the entire picture that I'm trying to paint for you lovely ass people. So I didn't mention it last time, but Letecia has a 17-year-old daughter from a previous marriage, and her name is Harley. I'll mention her a few times throughout the investigation, so I'm going to introduce her now since I didn't before, though she was featured in the unedited version of Letecia's one television interview with her back to the camera. Albert has been in the National Guard since 2005 actually, and currently he's said to be in the 100th Missile Defense Battalion, which I'm not sure about a lot of military stuff, but that sounds like some heavy ass shit to me. It was alleged, just alleged, that Albert had actually had an affair with Letecia while with Landon, Gannon's mother. Something about everyone being on the same softball team from what I gather on Facebook posts that I have seen that have since been screenshotted but obviously deleted. The only weight I give is that Landon said herself after Letecia was arrested that she even trusted Letecia. But I kind of got the feeling that there was like a longer history there between everyone, but I'm really just speculating based on rumor, honestly. Moving on though, Letecia and Albert got officially married in January of 2015, so about 5 years ago. This was when Gannon was 11 and Lena would be 4. Letecia had said before in her interview with Spencer Wilson that she has taken care of Gannon for the last 2 years. So I'm guessing the children's primary home was actually Landon's prior to these 2 years. Letecia was in the picture, big time at least. Landon has explained that her and Albert had switched times they would normally have the children this year because she had recently had a baby last year in 2019. So Gannon was not only a full brother to Lena, but a stepbrother to Harley and a new half-brother to his baby sister that Landon had just had. In the days leading up to the disappearance, Letecia's internet history is pretty well documented within her arrest warrant affidavit that has since been released, and it indicates that she might not have been very happy in her current relationship with Albert. Letecia did in fact get offered a teaching assistant job in a nearby school district. However, the offer was actually withdrawn during the first few days of Gannon's disappearance. Interestingly, it wasn't due to that investigation. It was actually something to do with her background check not coming back very well, according to a few sources that I've read through. Her criminal history is mentioned vaguely in this arrest warrant affidavit, but even it mentions that her past criminal history isn't and shouldn't be used as an indicator of guilt within Gannon's investigation. You know, it pretty much lays out the case against her on top of her criminal history. There's been a phone call that's been released on YouTube with a man who claims to be Albert's brother, and that would be Gannon's uncle. He reveals to a YouTuber named Dad with a Phone that Albert's mother had actually just stayed with him, Letecia, and the kiddos in their Colorado Springs home. And on the Saturday prior to Gannon's disappearance, that would be the 25th of January, Albert and his mother both left together as they both had flights out the same day, and I'm assuming hers was back home, possibly to South Carolina, and Albert was leaving for work with the National Guard in Oklahoma and then over to Texas. But something must have happened prior to Albert leaving that Saturday, the 25th, because the affidavit shows a shit ton of rage searches made by Letecia starting at 12:16 on Saturday, and periodically the entire weekend until 9:27 p.m. on Sunday the 26th, and that would be the day before Gannon was presumed by authorities to have been murdered by Letecia. I found a screenshot during my research of a post that Landon, Gannon and Lena's biological mom, had made on January 22nd. That's just a few days prior to this weekend, which might have something to do with these search entries, but again, it's just speculation on my part. Landon's post was one of those lovey-dovey posts you do for your kiddos on Facebook, and usually when it's around their birthday. And I also know that was actually Lena's birthday from seeing it on the affidavit, so I'm thinking Letecia must have got a little triggered by this post Landon made, and you'll see why I say that here in a second. There was a lot of search entries, you guys, so I'm not going to list every single one of them here, but to give you the gist of where she seemed mentally at that time, or so it seems, I am going to give you a handful of them. So at 12:16, I believe that was her first entry, she searched military singles in your area. At 1:40 p.m., she searches, I'm overdoing all the work for my stepkids and their mom doesn't help. At 1:45, she texts, if you're not involved in your kid's life, you are shitty. 1:51, I wonder if my husband's ex-wife is sending me a Valentine's Day card since I raise her kids. 1:54, one day people will wish they treated you differently. 3:35, why my husband should choose me over his family. And then 4 hours later at 7:57 p.m., she jumps to, find me a rich guy who wants me to take care of his kids and get paid. So yeah, obviously there's some resentment there, but not enough evidence of murder. Possibly something to do with motive if there ever was one. I would be willing to bet that Albert must have left the home before she started making all these entries to the Google machine, but I did not see a time for his actual departure in all of the research. I wanted to also mention that Letecia allegedly has or had a sugar baby account, which isn't super crazy, but you think you wouldn't have one if you were married, which reportedly her profile had some activity on that Sunday before Gannon went missing. Moving on to January 26th of 2020, the rage entries to Google include, "It's crappy, some parents don't care for their kids or buy them presents" at 9:25 p.m. She went the whole day without searching anything and then searches that at 9:25 p.m. And then 2 minutes later, she searches, "Parents are those that put their kids before their nails." Obviously I'm not sure what any of this is about, but we can all speculate a little bit, Letecia, Lena, and Gannon were said to have gone hiking that Sunday before Gannon went missing. They live about 10 minutes away from a super beautiful looking park called Garden of the Gods, where they each went hiking. Letecia actually took a photo of the three of them while they were there. And though it's been disputed that the picture wasn't actually taken on that Sunday, there was actually another man who you can see photobombed their shot, and he's standing with a blue coat in the background, and he has since come forward and verified that the picture was in fact taken on that Sunday, January 26th. In one interview Letecia did on camera on January 31st, that would be 4 days after Gannon had gone missing, Letecia mentioned that her and the kiddos had Burger King after this hike. It really has no relevance from what I can tell, but the way she mentioned it on camera was super weird to me. You just have to see it to really understand what I mean, so you should definitely watch that. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Roderick Drayton, the neighbor who lives a couple doors down from the Stauch residence, has actually come out and said he did in fact see Gannon alive and very well that Sunday afternoon, while he was playing outside in their front yard with his little sister Lena. Nothing appeared to be wrong and all was well, or so it seemed to him. I believe this is why he makes the comments that when he watched Gannon on camera the next day, he didn't seem to be active or energetic like he was the day before. He describes Gannon as possibly drugged, actually, which is something that was never addressed later in the affidavit, probably because it's technically hearsay, but it's interesting if they could have done an accurate toxicology report on Gannon's remains by the time they had gotten to them. I don't know, because they've remained pretty quiet on the condition of the body outside of what was mentioned, but Roderick was getting at he did not appear as lively as he did the day before. So this Sunday night becomes an interesting date because something significant occurred in the really late hours, probably after Letecia's search entries at 9:28 about parents put their kids before their nails, yada yada yada. There's screenshots of Letecia's Apple Watch that show a text message written by her and sent to presumably Albert about a candle that Gannon had accidentally knocked over and it ended up burning part of the carpet. She specifies that Gannon is okay, but he's crying, saying sorry, and he's freaking out. The next bit of info on this little incident was a video recording released by Letecia, actually, and posted to her Facebook a few weeks after Gannon had went missing. I believe her reason for posting the recording was some sort of defense claim that she was helping, finger quotes, him out of this tough spot that he got himself into by accidentally burning the carpet. And I don't love listening to this clip. It's actually pretty heartbreaking because Gannon sounds extremely upset and scared. And it turns out that this clip might actually explain a lot more about what possibly happened to Gannon, or at the very least, what type of stepmother he's dealing with. Again, it's very emotional, so if you're super sensitive, because I'm going to play it for you, but honestly, I don't know, brace yourself, I suppose, because it's hard to listen to.
The TMZ information. Gannon, I promise it's the last time I'm going to ask you. I'm just freaked out, okay? Are you sure you didn't do it on purpose? He did it. Okay, you promise. You promise. Purpose. Pinky promise. Pinky. Okay, alright, so, listen. We're going to have to sell stuff to fix it, okay? So, we figure out what we're going to sell. We can sell the sofa. We can sell whatever, because we got to get it fixed so the lady Don't be mad at us and kick us out of the house. Okay? You got it?
Okay, now that we're all upset now, let's take it a step further where at the very, 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 very end of this clip, you can actually hear Gannon say that he's bleeding. You'll have to listen very, very closely, but it's literally the last few seconds of the recording. And go ahead and play it back if you can handle it. Or you could just take my word for it because, you know, this little recording of hers has been spread all throughout the internet with tons of people who have been able to turn it up and prove what he said. The text messages to Albert that night appear to have been sent at 10:54 p.m., so pretty late that night, and also indicates to Albert that Gannon isn't feeling well and has some tummy problems, so she'll have to figure out the school and the work situation for that next Monday. Letecia's overall phone history, per the affidavit, actually shows that she spent very little time sleeping that Sunday night, and her search entries include, "My son burned the carpet, how do I fix it?" at 12:09 a.m. At 12:42 a.m., "Will humidifier help if exposed to smoke?" 12:55 a.m. "Colorado law for kids staying at home." 1:01 a.m. "Son is sick, but I have to go to work." And then 3 hours later, which I'm assuming she must have fallen asleep for a little bit, at 4:40 a.m., she searches suede repair for sofa. And I omitted a couple where she basically asked the same thing twice, but in a different way. But also, I wonder what the fuck was wrong with the sofa, since you just heard her tell Gannon in that recording that they could sell it to fix the carpet. Did something happen to the couch too? That particular search entry is kind of confusing for me. After 3 hours of presumable sleep, she wakes up and wonders how to fix her couch. It's kind of odd. So from the looks of it, by 1 a.m. on that Sunday night, Letecia was planning on keeping Gannon home from school, and she claims it's because he has these chronic stomach issues. Her text messages to Albert via the affidavit mention that she's planning on telling her work something so that she can stay home with Gannon because he's sick. Moving on to the morning of January 27th, and boy, does she ever tell her work something. It was said in the affidavit that she actually texted her new employers in the school district, presumably at the school district, I suppose, that her stepfather had been struck by a car and killed, and that she wouldn't be able to make it into work that day. Very casual, Letecia. Real fucking casual. What I don't understand is why she didn't just tell them that her stepson was supposedly sick. Like she had told Albert, and most likely his school, when she called him an absent that morning, which was also verified in the affidavit. I don't know why she went to such an extreme lie to tell her employer. It's very weird. So Letecia presumably gets Lena ready for school sometime before 9 a.m., as she is said to ride the bus to and from school. Remember, she's 8 years old, so probably about in the second grade. Letecia's daughter Harley has been confirmed per the affidavit that she was at work this Monday from 8 in the morning to about 4:40-ish. So what I'm getting at is that it's only Gannon and Letecia alone in the home after 9 a.m. by the latest, since everyone else in the home has left. Now remember, Gannon's father Albert is also out of town on his way to Texas for work. Now there's some super shitty photos in this affidavit actually. It's most likely from being copied so many times, but the photos as we have seen them look like they've been taken from a camera from the 1940s. There's a few photos that are included, allegedly taken by Letecia this Monday morning, showing Gannon sleeping in his bed with his Nintendo Switch next to him, with a timestamp of 8:13 and another one at 8:17 a.m. There's a third photo taken as a still shot from police body cam footage the night Gannon went missing during the preliminary search of the home. Now, you obviously don't have these photos in front of you, and to be honest, it really doesn't matter because the quality of the photos is literal garbage. The biggest difference seen by investigators, though, is that Gannon's bed appears to have been moved over a few feet where it normally is positioned in the room. Albert can confirm that the room is not normally arranged like this, or at the very least, it wasn't that way when he left just 2 days prior to this. Because the photos are copies of copies of copies, it's not immediately obvious that the bed has been repositioned, at least to you and me. The next thing we know about Letecia's movements is that she locked her iPhone at 9:54 a.m. that day and didn't use it all day long, which the detective who wrote the arrest affidavit specifically raises the point that Letecia has so many logged hours on social media accounts that the very fact she didn't bring her phone with her the day Gannon went missing is a very interesting move altogether. However, Letecia did have an Apple Watch, so I don't think it's very different than actually having your phone, honestly. I don't have one, so I don't know. It's coming into the hour where Gannon is technically last seen alive on their neighbor Roderick Drayton's security footage as he and Letecia leave the home at 10:16 a.m. If you had a chance to watch the footage, I believe those are also copies of copies, which will also give a very grainy appearance, and it makes it hard to see that when Gannon comes into the shot after walking out of the home, he actually dropped his Nintendo Switch on the ground there next to the driver's side of the truck. You can see him sort of just look down at it, but he makes no effort whatsoever to lean over and pick it up, which is sort of odd to me. Something so expensive and special, you'd think the kid would be quick to pick it up and make sure it didn't break, you know? Roderick Drayton says that Gannon appeared to be drugged or at the least groggy. This might just explain why Gannon had literally no reaction to dropping his Switch. It was also said in text messages between Letecia and Albert that Gannon wasn't feeling good that day, also why he isn't at school at the time, and that could also be a reason why he didn't react to him dropping his Switch. But nonetheless, Letecia, who quickly walks into the frame, leans over and picks the Switch up off the ground, seems to hand it to Gannon while he climbs into the back seat of the driver's side. We're talking about the footage of him climbing into Albert's red Nissan 4x4 truck. They sit in the truck for a few minutes and pull out of the driveway and drive away. The phone activity for Letecia at this time isn't really talked about, so investigators have looked at Gannon's phone history actually. A little after they were seen leaving the home on video, a text message was sent to Harley and sent from Gannon's phone at 10:37 a.m. It reads, "Tisha left her phone at home. If you need her, text me." It's presumed by detectives that Letecia wrote this, strictly considering the way Letecia was addressed as Tisha in the message. However, it's almost impossible to be sure. Letecia is next seen on camera at a Petco store about 30 minutes away from her home at 11:22 a.m. She's seen without Gannon, and there's even screenshots of an alleged Petco employee from that very location that has commented on Facebook that she saw Letecia in the Petco that morning and she purchased 3 dog coats and described her behavior as odd in the way that Letecia kept going to the front of the store and peering out the window, presumably at the truck, before making her purchases. The employee went on to say that Letecia had came back about 2 hours later at 1:22 p.m., though she is not the associate that helped her the second time and couldn't say anything else about it. It's technically hearsay, but that actual Petco location is in fact on the witness list found in the affidavit, so I do believe Letecia was in fact there that day. The 2-hour window in which Letecia was said to have been seen at Petco between 11:22 for the first visit and 1:22 on the second, some interesting phone activity has been logged into Gannon's phone. At 12:06 p.m., Albert had sent Gannon a text message that read, "Hey buddy." Gannon's phone didn't reply until 1:21 p.m., but said, "Can I at least play Zelda?" This is presumably on his Nintendo Switch that he was seen leaving the home with, and actually has yet to be found or mentioned at all when his remains were discovered. His dad replied, "Not today." Again, it's impossible to know if Gannon or Letecia is writing these messages at this point. However, the fact that the message wasn't opened or replied to until the literal minute before Letecia is seen walking into the Petco for the second time could either mean it was Gannon texting from the truck while waiting for Letecia, or it was Letecia who had just checked Gannon's phone before she walked into the Petco. We won't know that for sure until the trial, if there even is one, but I'm betting there will be. Something else interesting happens with Gannon's phone. A search entry is typed in at 1:48 p.m. The search on his phone is, "Can my parent find my cell phone if it's off?" Notice how it doesn't say parents? Investigators specified that it was extremely odd that an 11-year-old would phrase the question in this manner and actually presume it was Letecia who had used Gannon's phone to search this to lay down the foundation that he had possibly ran away from home. Next, this is when Letecia is seen arriving home on the neighbor's security home footage at about 2:19 p.m., and presumably Gannon is with her even though he's not in the shot. The family's home security system has logged the movements within this time frame and are referenced in the arrest affidavit. It's sort of hard to decipher what's going on in the home, honestly, and I've looked at each entry and each movement, and I've even hopped online and did the virtual tour in the actual home online from the previous real estate company who had featured it. There's honestly a bunch of different ways to interpret the movement history because you have to also toy with the possibilities that Gannon did or did not return home with her at this time. The camera footage alludes to the idea that Gannon did not return home. The affidavit would try to argue that he did come home. And I actually went and made a supporting video of the footage on my YouTube to offer my reasoning behind the fact that I also agree with the investigators that Gannon did in fact return home that day with Letecia at 2:19, despite Gannon not being visible in the neighbor's security footage. I implore you to check out the video on YouTube if you need some help understanding why I'm fairly confident he did return. This moment within the investigation has been a major fork in the road for what might have happened to Gannon. We can either go down the road that he didn't come home and he was dumped somewhere else, or the road where Gannon did come home and was tragically murdered and then transported out of the home, like police think. Or another fork would even be that Gannon might have been kidnapped by a rapist named Eduardo, but that is something we'll have to get into closer to the time of Letecia's police interview in a couple days. Moving on though, we have arrived to the time period where Letecia has alleged that Gannon left the Stauch home to play with a friend with his Nintendo Switch, but not his cell phone. This supposedly occurred while Letecia was downstairs working out. So at first, she can't exactly say when Gannon left, but it's generalized initially between 3:15 and 4 p.m. This would be a large part of the actual time frame that investigators allege Letecia murdered Gannon inside his downstairs bedroom. Next, we know Gannon's little sister Lena returns home from school after riding the bus, and footage, per the affidavit, captures her entering the residence around 3:11 p.m., just before Gannon's window for leaving was said to have been. Lena is later seen coming back outside, and she's riding her bike at about 3:30 p.m. It mentions a bit in the arrest affidavit for Letecia that her stepdaughter Lena had told investigators during her video-recorded interview in the days after Gannon went missing that when she returned home from school that day, Letecia said Gannon was sleeping in his bed and that she could not see him, and that's when she went outside to play on her bike. And that's a huge deal, you guys, because Gannon is supposedly gone to a friend's house at this time. So I'm not sure why Letecia chooses yet again to lie, like she did about her stepfather getting hit by a car, about something she didn't need to. She could have just told Lena that Gannon wasn't even home because he was at a friend's house. That's something Lena could have easily been able to tell investigators had it been the truth. But you see what I'm getting at here? Is that it's not the truth. As the great Judge Judy says, if it doesn't make sense, it's a lie. So next, Albert again sends a text message to Gannon's phone that says, "Hey buddy," at 3:55 p.m., which will actually go unopened and unresponded to until 7:40 p.m., almost an hour after Gannon's been reported missing to the police by Letecia. Per the affidavit, Letecia's 17-year-old daughter Harley arrives home from her work at 4:42 p.m. I believe this is seen on the security footage. Then she is seen leaving minutes later with little sister Lena, and they are both said to have gone to a nearby Dollar General. Letecia's phone activity reports a text message sent to her daughter Harley's phone just minutes after she was seen leaving with Lena on security footage. The text message reads, "Carpet powder, 2 things, baking soda, trash bags," and was sent at 4:52 p.m. Pretty fucking ominous, wouldn't you say? I suppose coincidental could also be used, but let's keep going, I guess. There was a receipt that was recovered from Letecia's Volkswagen Tiguan, which is a model of a car, a Tiguan, I'm going to say it a lot, from the Dollar General trip. This receipt was recovered from her Tiguan from the dollar store. The timestamp on it was 5:14 with the items Letecia had texted, as well as baby oil, baby lotion, cotton rounds, and bubble gum. It's my understanding that Harley drove her own car, a white Volkswagen Jetta, to the Dollar General with Lena. So I'll have to explain how this receipt probably ended up in Letecia's car by the time the police got a hold of it. Doing my own little creeping, I found that the nearest Dollar General to the address listed on the affidavit is about a 10-minute drive. So without knowing if Harley and Lena went anywhere after this dollar store trip, I would guess this puts them back at the home at about 5:24 p.m., when you'd have to imagine that Letecia is probably getting worried, finger quotes, that Gannon hasn't returned home to his friend's house at dark like he's supposed to. Letecia's phone history has a search to Google logged at 6:54 p.m. for the El Paso Sheriff's Office number, and it's been said in the affidavit that she did first call 911, but they had actually directed her to call the non-emergency line, which probably prompted this phone search. The official call in regards to Gannon being missing is logged at 6:55 p.m., and his information is said to be entered in police databases at about 7:32 p.m. I have seen some screenshots of Facebook posts that show Landon, Gannon's real mom, posting that she was notified that Gannon was missing about 11 p.m. her time, which she lives in South Carolina at the moment. So that would mean police called her about 8 p.m. their time in Colorado Springs. Last week, I noted the first actual semi-public post about Gannon's disappearance was actually made on a neighborhood group app by a friend of the family that was notified per Gannon's father, Albert, as he was trying to track his son down while he was out of town. There's been screenshots taken of Letecia explaining that she doesn't really keep up with Gannon's friends, and that would be why Albert has more phone numbers that he can call than she does. It's also reported that the actual police that were dispatched to the home for the call did not actually arrive until about 10:09 p.m., basically 3 entire hours after she made the call. This gap is not addressed in the timeline, but we can assume that it really gave whoever really had Gannon, even if it wasn't Letecia, whoever had him had 3 extra hours to hide any evidence of it, which is pretty upsetting. The preliminary searches of the neighborhood go on until about 3 a.m. into that early morning. On January 28th of 2020, which is day number 2 of Gannon being missing, early in the morning, Letecia's phone searches begin with, "What is the process of our runaway child?" And that's at 4:15 a.m. And nope, that didn't work, so she tried, "Police steps for our runaway" at 4:16 a.m. And she didn't get a good enough answer again, so she tries, "Police steps for missing child" at 4:16 a.m. That might have given her some goods, because 20 minutes later, she searches, "Today's flights, Oklahoma to Colorado" at 4:36 a.m. Some text messages are then logged between Letecia and presumably the children's babysitter, and they're actually screenshotted and showed a conversation that was happening at the 5 a.m. hour. At 5:14 a.m., Letecia says, "This happened after 3:30, and this is presumably answering the babysitter's question about what happened to Gannon the day he went missing." Letecia adds, "We talked to him then and told him to be home by 6. This person in the phone, named as Stephanie Sitter, in parentheses, quickly comments to Letecia, "Someone posted that he wasn't at school either." So Letecia replies, "We had to go to the doctor's for his stomach, but he was here in the afternoon." The sitter asks, "Where did he say he was at?" Letecia replies, "Honestly, I don't keep up with his friends." Then, in the 6 o'clock hour, there's a text message exchange between Gannon's real mom and Letecia, where Landon texts, "Leaving here with my brother at 3:30 from Myrtle. Can we stay there?" And I think she means Myrtle Beach, where she lives. Letecia answers, "Just ask Albert so he isn't upset with me while making decisions without asking, but someone can get you from the airport. Harley or I can. I'm heading out with the searchers." Landon replies, "Find my baby, please. Find my babe." It's a little odd that she can't just be like, "Of course, Landon, your son's missing. Why would you stay anywhere else?" But no, she's like, "Just ask Albert because I don't want to start anything." Pretty lame. So we know Landon will be here shortly, and if you remember last week, when Letecia said in the interview that her husband's ex-wife is living in our home, so you know Landon does end up staying there when she gets into town. Letecia's phone history actually shows activity on Priceline next at 8:17 a.m., and she then drops off her Volkswagen Tiguan at the airport's short-term parking area at 8:30 a.m., per the time card also found in her car after it was seized. Letecia then rents herself a brand new Kia Rio from the airport's Avis budget rental car area and picks up Gannon's father from the airport, explaining that Gannon won't recognize the rental car, so he won't run if they happen to find him while out searching. Remember, he was thought to have been a runaway based on his phone's Google search, and it said, "Can my parent find my phone if it's off?" So, which I'm assuming we all know what assuming does, but I'm going to risk this one. I'm assuming she showed that search to the police to back up the claims that she felt like he had run away, and that was why he never returned home. Gannon's father actually agreed that if Gannon felt like he was in trouble or something, that him and Letecia might have a better chance at finding him in a car that he wouldn't recognize. Another reason Letecia explained renting this Kia Rio was that her Volkswagen Tiguan was actually leased at the time, and she would apparently get a fee if she put too many miles on it every month, which I have a leased car, and that's not something I've actually heard of, but no one else seems to be as weirded out by that excuse, so I guess I won't be either. I would like to add that even though her leased Volkswagen Tiguan was parked at the airport, she actually told Albert that she had parked it near a local elementary school, which we now know, Q Mori.
That was a lie.
Did you like that? Back to the timeline, though. Letecia picks up Albert from the airport and then texts her daughter Harley at 8:54 a.m., "Pull your car into the garage." Okay then. The first official news media report that is made about Gannon is aired on an 11 o'clock segment on that Tuesday morning. It's not directly clear which of the parents had reported him missing, but they quoted Albert in saying that this behavior wasn't like Gannon and that he was not the type of child to run away. So a lot of people assumed Gannon's dad was present at the time he disappeared and not actually out of state until more information was released as Gannon continued to be missing. Police were said to have arrived back at the Stauch residence to arrange volunteer search efforts within the neighborhood about 9 a.m. The neighbor who released his security footage, Roderick Drayton, says he actually came over to Letecia and Albert early in the investigation and offered to check his own security cameras before the police had told everybody to do it. But he also says in the interview that Letecia had actually disregarded his suggestion initially. Gannon walked the other way, so it would be a fruitless effort, basically. But if you recall, she apparently told police that she wasn't exactly sure what time Gannon left the home because she was downstairs in the basement at the time he left. So how the hell could she know what way he walked then?
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my god, stop fucking lying.
I mean, it was always reported that Gannon was gone missing sometime between 3:15 and 4 p.m. on that Monday afternoon of the 27th. And looking back, the neighbor was most likely bothered by her statements enough to double-check the footage on his own, which is what led to its release in the media when they caught her in a lie. Later in the day, allegedly after searching the neighborhood for Gannon, though volunteers actually dispute the fact that Letecia spent any time searching for Gannon with them, her phone activity shows a couple more searches, one at 4:18 p.m. for Volkswagen CarNet, and another at 4:19 p.m. with, "They're asking for my son's toothbrush, they said nothing is wrong." Then her text messages to Albert. Apparently he wasn't at home during this particular hour, most likely at the news or maybe getting Landon, based on the timeline. But Letecia texts Al, "Something isn't right, I think they're hiding something," and that's at 4:31 p.m. And he replies, "Who? The police?" And that's within seconds. She replies, "Yes, they asked me for toothbrushes," again, all within the same minute, and he replies, "What do you think they're hiding?" And I'd personally be like, fucking duh, they want his DNA. Don't you watch true crime? But you know, she's probably shitting her pants at that moment if she, in fact, is guilty of hurting Gannon. Now, I'm not sure what, but something happened in the next few hours that ends up with Albert or either the investigators kicking Letecia out of the home, presumably when he returns from wherever he's at, or for her to be texting him about the toothbrushes. The affidavit mentions Letecia had actually turned off her cell phone for a big chunk of time in this evening of Tuesday the 28th, only one day after Gannon's been missing. Her whereabouts were unknown at that time, but the parking slip that was recovered in her Tiguan after the seizure indicates that she picked it back up from the airport short-term parking lot at about 7:02 p.m. Then her Volkswagen Tiguan's CarNet actually reports that it was parked in an area near a King Superstore way up north for about 10 minutes from 8:08 to 8:18. So her CarNet's GPS history also indicates that her car is in the same general area of some very interesting items that would be found by investigators within the couple days. The last thing mentioned on the night of the Tuesday the 28th was when Letecia directly texted the head detective of the case, who happened to write out and file the same affidavit that I'm getting all this information from. Letecia texts at 10:25 p.m., "What do you want from me? Because I have nothing. Even one of your very own leaked what you guys are doing. I did nothing, or I'm being set up. I was told I couldn't go home to sleep, and on top of that, men were sent to the home of a female minor. She was forced to stay there, not even to leave for food. Every conversation that said, even at this moment, I can hear inside. What do you want from me?" To which Detective Bethel replied seemingly calmly, "Come in and talk to me. I'd just like info to find Gannon." Interestingly, Harley's phone activity shows that she then leaves the Stauch residence a minute later at 10:26 after that text was sent, and her cell phone location puts her in the same location of Letecia's. So detectives seem to assume that Harley left and then went and picked up Letecia from the area the phones are traced to. What I'm personally not sure of is why Letecia would need a ride, because she actually has access to her Tiguan at this time, and she was using it earlier that night. In addition to the Tiguan, she also had that rental Kia that she got from the airport and has yet to return. So she has 2 cars. Why would she need a ride? And even though I haven't seen much about it, I believe Letecia was probably staying at a nearby hotel with Harley, since we have come to learn that she was, for whatever reason, told she could not go home to sleep. She also later says in an interview with Colorado Springs reporter Spencer Wilson that it's hard when people are waiting outside your hotel. So I'm pretty confident she stayed in one that was close by. So we've come to January 29th, the 3rd day in the search for Gannon. And this is the morning that I believe the family's neighbor, Roderick Drayton, had stayed up all night and watched his security footage. He said he watched it at least 30 times before telling Albert that he really needed to see what he found on tape. If you remember from last week, Albert allegedly started crying upon viewing the footage and claimed that she lied, he didn't go to a friend's house, and then notified the FBI immediately after. I also believe that this was the first day that onlookers in the neighborhood started posting online in Facebook about witnessing crime scene vans outside the home, which leads to a news report later in the evening with the investigation spokesperson clarifying that the crime scene van is rather routine and just allows the investigators access to appropriate technology needed for finding Gannon, which in hindsight wasn't a lie, but they were absolutely taking a closer look at the home and what actually happened to Gannon, because the security footage only offers more questions about Gannon's disappearance than answers at this point. Not one security camera from any of those other homes had managed to capture Gannon leaving the family home after Letecia had said. More things are starting to not add up, and her behavior is starting to become increasingly questionable, all within those first 48 hours of his disappearance. So this poses the question, did Gannon ever really leave that home alive? This is actually where I'm going to stop and let the story marinate just a tad bit longer. A shit ton of information to drop at once on you. And like I said before, this entire case is pretty crazy by how fast the events have occurred between the time that Gannon goes missing until now, while we wait for Letecia's trial to begin. So next week, I'm going to pick it up at the 48-hour mark of Gannon's disappearance, and we'll get into Letecia's wild-ass interview with police, then news reports. The story is not even close to being over, so please join me again next week to find out one of the cutest little boys that I've come to learn about and how he was taken away way too soon at the hands of his very own stepmother, or so police have come to find. It's pretty evident that something bad happened to Gannon, and the amount of red flags piling up against Letecia are just getting really hard to ignore. I think justice might get served this time. Just a reminder that I have started doing a pretty casual weekly live stream with an app called Get Vocal. It's called Tea Time with Ginger, and there I chat about all the hot true crime tea going on in mainstream media. So be sure to hop on facebook.com/truecrimequeen and give your girl a like and come chat with me on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I also wanted to give a bit of a heads up for future cases. I have spent a bit of time considering things, and I've made the decision to temporarily release new episodes bi-weekly rather than weekly. I feel like I need to cut back for a while, being that this quarantine lifestyle we're in has made it extra hard for me to balance the new responsibility of being my children's homeschool teacher and making a good quality podcast still. With that being said, I think bi-weekly episodes will help me continue making just as in-depth retellings of cases while not ignoring my kids' educational needs. After part 3 of the story of Gannon Stauch, I will then start releasing episodes every 2 weeks. And it's just temporarily until all our lives get back to normal. If I can drop episodes sooner, I totally will. But I just wanted to give everybody a little bit more of a heads up that the schedule is changing around a little bit. Please don't hate me. I still want to create some of the most detailed podcasts that you've heard. I just need you to bear with me while life is weird for a little bit. I'll remind everyone again on next week's episode as well. And don't forget that part 3 is going to tie all these movements by Letecia together and give us a bigger picture to why she's currently in jail for little Gannon's murder. And you guys, that was the tea. I hope you enjoyed my rendition of the story, and if so, please tell all your creepy ass friends about it. You can find the sources I used for the episode in its description. You can find me slanging those memes on Instagram at True Crime Queen. Check them out if you need some laughs after all this dark shit. If you'd like to support the podcast, consider buying me a coffee so I can keep making y'all that killer ass content. You see what I did there? And always remember to lock those damn doors, you guys. Be safe. All right, guys, have a good week. Bye.